Hello, I'm Dr. Tara Palmatier of shrinkformen.com. If you have a question or would like to schedule a session with me, you can reach me at shrinkformen@gmail.com. This video is an excerpt from a chapter of a book I'm currently in the process of finishing on the topic of personality disorders. It is not available for purchase yet. As soon as it is, I will let you know. So here we go. Personality disorders. Forewarned is forearmed. People who consistently and chronically abuse others often have some kind of personality disorder. This book isn't about personality disorders per se. It's about recognizing and understanding the characterologically disordered and other toxic individuals in order to better protect yourself from them. An ounce of prevention now will spare you a great deal of emotional pain, not to mention legal fees later. Rather than focusing on the different personality disorders and enumerating their respective criteria, let's explore how some people trip themselves up in an effort to understand, manage, and often futilely try to fix disordered loved ones. Are you a self-taught personality disorder expert? Unless you plan to get an advanced psychology degree, there's no need to become a self-taught expert in personality disorders. If you do, you'll be further along than many mental health professionals. I'm not exaggerating. Many people get hung up on granular classifications of crazy. For example, I think I was married to a waif hermit borderline with covert narcissistic tendencies. Look, there's such a thing as becoming obsessed with diagnostic classifications, and it's unhealthy. It's more important to recognize the traits of people who will hurt and exploit you without regard or remorse than it is to make distinctions in arcane subclinical diagnostic variations. Why? First, self-preservation. Does it matter how the fire started in the movie theater when the heat of the flames is licking your face and your lungs are burning from the smoke? Of course not. You exit the theater in an orderly fashion. Determining fire patterns and how the fire started is important later for liability and insurance purposes, repairs, reconstruction, and fire prevention. It's irrelevant when the fire is singeing your nose hairs. Second, unless you belong to a group that enjoys dissecting diagnostic criteria, you risk sounding crazy or boring and alienating others who don't speak that language. This includes people you need to believe you, like law enforcement, judges, social workers, psychologists, guardians ad litem, custody evaluators, friends and family, so they can help you. You're more likely to have a good outcome if you explain things in everyday language and ease off the diagnostic alphabet soup. Third, unless you work in the fields of education, mental health, medicine, or law, don't make this your life's work. Focus on healing, moving forward, and living your life without toxic people and without abuse. If you're a few years out of a relationship with a narcissist, borderline, or psychopath and are still regularly focusing on this kind of literature without being paid to do so, it probably means you need to put more focus on yourself and any remaining healing work you've not done yet. Obsessing on narcissists, borderlines, and other forms of crazy can be a way to maintain an unhealthy connection to your exes and/or family of origin members. Personality disorder nomenclature is basically shorthand for clinicians. Each disorder identifies clusters and patterns of extreme behaviors and traits that persist throughout the individual's lifespan. How does being able to distinguish the difference between borderline waifs with self-harm tendencies and cerebral narcissists help you in everyday life? Maybe the subject really is that interesting to you. I don't know. Nonetheless, please consider if continuing to analyze personality disorders in excruciating detail is helping you move forward or keeping you stuck. One could argue, again, it's a way to avoid the pain of the grieving process, letting go of your abuser, or a way to avoid dealing with your own stuff. Next, are you engaging in wishful thinking? Wishful thinking is a psychological defense that usually occurs during the denial and bargaining stages of grief. For example, if my spouse is diagnosed, they'll finally get help and become a totally different person. Sorry, but no. At best, the negative symptoms of disordered individuals are managed, not cured. Treatment doesn't guarantee success, and it can take a long time before improvements are seen. Many disordered people don't see the need to change because they don't see anything wrong with their behavior or attitudes, unless they fear a consequence like divorce, being fired, public exposure, or jail. Once the threat of the unwanted consequence is removed, the narcissist usually reverts to standard operating procedure. Even when they genuinely want to change, it's incredibly difficult. And again, self-awareness, and read the blogs of self-aware narcissists and borderlines for an example of this, and treatment do not guarantee success. What many victims really want is for their abuser to return to the idealization or love bombing stage of the relationship. This wish isn't about your partner getting better. It's about returning to fantasy land. That person never existed. You fell in love with a fantasy. It's painful to admit, but that's the reality of it. Another example of wishful thinking is, if my ex is diagnosed, I'll get primary custody and my kids will have a better chance of growing into healthy adults. I wish this were true in the majority of custody cases, but it isn't. Many disordered people are natural-born actors and adept at gaming systems. Couple this with the fact that most family court judges are woefully ignorant about personality disorders, and it's not the silver bullet many people think it is, and it gets worse. Many people who enter the law profession and mental health field have a high degree of narcissistic or psychopathic traits themselves. And oftentimes, the family court system seems like a system by sociopaths for sociopaths. No narcissist likes having a mirror held up to themselves, and that includes judges, lawyers, and therapists. Judges may also attribute the bandying of psychiatric labels as a means of jockeying for leverage in custody. If you decide to fight for primary custody, you'll be more effective describing the abusive behaviors in everyday language, especially ones that are damaging to the kids, rather than making layperson diagnoses. This will also be more effective with custody evaluators. Let the professionals use the labels and you stick to behavioral descriptions. Hoping to get a diagnosis? Many individuals who qualify for personality disorder diagnoses are never formally evaluated or diagnosed. Oftentimes, these persons, especially those who are able to mask their symptoms when it serves them to do so, can go their entire lives evading and avoiding detection and diagnosis. This is due to two factors. One, the inherent characteristics of personality disorders, and two, mental health professionals' reluctance to diagnose personality disorders. Narcissists, borderlines, histrionics, and psychopaths have a lifelong pattern of blaming others for their behaviors and whatever's wrong in their lives, especially the self-inflicted crises, debacles, and conflicts. For example, a narcissist will punch you in the nose and then blame you for bloodying their knuckles. Narcissists don't do accountability. Correction. They enjoy holding others accountable, particularly anyone they believe has wronged, affronted, or slighted them. As for holding themselves accountable, only if they're hoovering, i.e., trying to seduce you back into the relationship with them, or as a means to an end. For example, my narcissistic ex understood the tactical necessity of, quote unquote, falling on his sword. However, he wasn't sincere on the rare occasions he apologized to bosses or clients. He was clear he was doing so to avoid or minimize personally experiencing the negative consequences of his actions, and he resented having to do so greatly. Did he ever apologize to me during our 7.5-year relationship? Not that I recall, but there was no need. Through an early series of progressive boundary tests, we established my willingness to tolerate his garbage and not hold him accountable in order to preserve the relationship. This is something I observe my clients do repeatedly. Partners of the disordered intuit or consciously understand that holding an abuser accountable won't improve the relationship, but may well end it. A narcissist or borderline might admit to having issues, but they blame the cause of their issues on other people or the world in general. In other words, it's somebody else's fault for not accommodating their needs, wants, and brittle little egos. Put the pieces together, and what do you get? Someone who's reluctant to seek therapy and, even if they do, is highly, highly, highly treatment resistant. What do I mean by treatment resistant? The moment the therapist tries to help them see how they create their own hell, the disordered person typically ends treatment. Once codependents figure out that we create our own hells, we usually beat up on ourselves for a time and then begin the healing process. Unfortunately, getting to that point can take a while. Even if you can get the narcissist or other forms of crazy to see a psychologist, it doesn't guarantee a diagnosis. First, narcissists, borderlines, psychopaths, histrionics, and other abusers lie pathologically and prolifically. Even when they get busted, they tell more lies on top of the original lies. This includes lying to therapists. For example, a former client's now ex-fiance, he got the ring back, when asked what her therapist thought about her cheating, replied, "Why would I tell my therapist the truth? What would I get out of it?" It can take a while for therapists to catch on to the lies, distortions, and exaggerations. Some therapists never do. There are a number of reasons for this. Some are reluctant to diagnose personality disorders or just won't do it. The personality disordered are also referred to as high conflict people. Find a frivolous lawsuit, and you'll likely find a high conflict person driving it. In other words, therapists don't want to get sued for diagnosing a client with narcissism, sociopathy, or borderline personality disorder. I've worked with divorcing clients whose narcissistic and borderline exes sued their once idealized therapist or psychiatrist for this reason. It's a real risk. Many therapists don't want to work with the personality disordered because we're just as likely to become targets of blame and abuse. I won't work with disordered individuals for that reason and several others. For example, the potential for online and offline harassment, stalking, and smear campaigns. This actually happened to me. A number of self-identified borderlines who've stumbled upon my articles and videos have conducted online harassment and smear campaigns over the years. I consider it like a periodic flare-up of social media herpes. Offline, one of them contacted a charity for which I was once a board member to warn them about me. Some have contacted random men's organizations that I'm neither acquainted with nor affiliated with, seeking personal information about me. The person who took the call was kind enough to let me know by email. I don't know who these people are. I've never met them, much less worked with them. The majority of them hide behind the anonymity of the internet. Bullies are cowards. Personal and professional risk aside, treating the disorder is often frustrating and futile work. Some therapists don't want to stigmatize a person with a personality disorder diagnosis, meaning therapists don't want the disordered person to be regarded poorly by virtue of the fact they're personality disordered. While I understand this in theory, how do you treat someone without accurate diagnosis? That is, if the therapist has elected to take the disordered person on as a client. Furthermore, the label doesn't stigmatize them. Excuse me, I lost my place. Scrolling issues. Furthermore, the label doesn't stigmatize them. Their aberrant, abnormal, and abusive behavior is the problem, whatever we choose to call it. Even if you can get them accurately diagnosed, it doesn't necessarily translate into change and healing. Remember, the best you can hope for is that with a lot of therapy, time, and money, they will learn to manage their condition. If managing their condition involves you learning not to trigger them or practicing radical acceptance, they're not managing their disorder. You are. That means the wrong person is doing the work. Next, does high functioning mean the borderline or narcissist isn't that bad? Don't get excited. High functioning means the person is better at appearing normal and hiding the crazy in public and during the idealization or love bombing stage. It doesn't mean they're less toxic or dangerous than their low functioning counterparts. You can often easily recognize the low functioning individuals due to their overt self-destructive behaviors such as multiple suicide attempts, cutting and other self-mutilation scars, substance abuse, hospitalizations, and criminal records. The low-functioning ones typically require protection from themselves, and so do any minor children they may have, okay? We all require protection from high-functioning narcissists, borderlines, and psychopaths. They're the ones who hide in plain sight. In family court and other litigation, the high-functioning are persuasive and convincing liars. The low-functioning may engender the pity of the court, thereby avoiding the natural consequences of their behavior. They're such chaotic thinkers that their lies are usually patently obvious. They contradict themselves several times within a single sentence. It's hard to miss. Think about it. Who's more dangerous? The train wreck you can see coming from light years away, or the person who can hide the worst parts of her or himself until after you've married or had children with them? Next, do they know what they're doing? Excuse me. Yes and no. The high-functioning ones absolutely know what they're doing and why they're doing it. The low-functioning ones know what they're doing, but usually don't understand why they're doing it. Mid-level narcissists are sometimes aware and sometimes not. For example, high-functioning abusers often knowingly and purposefully use their rage as an intimidation and control tactic. They can shut it on and off like a fire hose. Clients have shared audio recordings of their spouses raging at them, so much so I can hear the spittle coming out of their mouths. And then their cell phone rings. They instantly go from yelling to calmly saying, "Hi, Linda, how's it going? Yoga and lunch on Wednesday? I'd love to." When most human beings are that angry and out of control, we're unable to turn it on and off. It takes time to calm ourselves and decompress. Both the high-functioning and low-functioning are able to convince themselves of their lies with repeated retelling of the lies. Can they have traits of more than one disorder? Yes. It's common to have traits and symptoms for more than one disorder. In fact, the DSM-5, that's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, changed the way personality disorders are diagnosed in 2010. Basically, they collapsed the diagnostic criteria into an a la carte menu. So instead of diagnosing someone with narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, or personality disorder not specified, we'd say, Chris is a borderline type with extreme aggression, emotional lability, separation insecurity, and hostility, mild self-harm, and impulsivity, and very little dissociation, proneness, and callousness. Monica seems to be a sociopathic, psychopathic type with extreme callousness, hostility, aggression, and maliciousness, moderate deceitfulness, and narcissism, and very little recklessness and impulsivity. Psychologists. Next, why won't my therapist discuss the likelihood of my spouse or ex having a personality disorder? There are a few reasons for this. One, Psychologists and other mental health professionals can't diagnose someone we haven't personally evaluated. We can say the behaviors being described sound like insert disorder or condition, but we can't give a definitive diagnosis. 2, even if your therapist evaluated your spouse or ex, they may not diagnose them for the reasons previously explained. 3, many mental health professionals get prickly when a layperson uses psychological terms, which they see as their exclusive purview. This one annoys me. You live with your spouse or lived with your ex, which gives you firsthand knowledge. If you have good reading comprehension and Google, you can compare the behaviors you've observed to the diagnostic criteria. Odds are, if it has feathers, waddles, and quacks, it's a duck. You don't need to be an ornithologist to identify Daffy, Donald, or Daisy. 4, since your spouse or ex isn't seeking treatment, the therapist will try to keep the focus on you, not what's wrong with the person who isn't in the office. In my practice, I have a caveat to this. When you're being abused and having your mind messed with by a narcissist or borderline, psychopath, or other toxic person, it's a relief to have your experiences and observations validated by a helping professional. One of the first stages in your recovery is making sense of the colossal mind messing with and other abuses you've suffered. It's also helpful to have questions regarding how and why someone behaves like that answered. Once that's done, I focus on what makes clients vulnerable to abusive partners, what keeps them in abusive relationships, even after they recognize they're being abused, self-care, and healing. Next, will having them diagnosed help protect my children? You can't completely protect your children from a disordered parent without removing them from that parent's care. Even if you accomplish that, and it's extremely difficult for fathers to do, the kids will still likely have issues. It's your responsibility as the non-disordered parent to teach the kids healthier ways of being. You're the best shot your kids have for a healthy role model. Excuse me, having more scrolling it shows. Do you want them to learn to tolerate abuse or to abuse others? These are the stakes. Hopefully, you can compensate the damage already sustained by setting a good enough example. You don't have to be perfect, just don't be disordered. And by recognizing and encouraging them when they show empathy and choose right from wrong. Also, validate their feelings and perceptions when the disordered parent's pathology slimes them without trashing the disordered parent. If necessary, find them competent professional help, for instance, a children's therapist who's equipped to deal with personality disorders, parental alienation, and grief and loss. Okay, well, that is a chapter from the book I'm currently working on. Hope you find it helpful. Again, my name is Dr. Tara Palmatier of shrinkformen.com. If you have a question or would like to schedule a session with me, you can reach me at shrinkformen@gmail.com. Thank you for watching and have a good day.